Alderwoman Sims.
Here.
Alderman Gould.
Here.
Alderman Shelton, absent. Alderwoman Tice.
Here. Item number 2 on the agenda is approval or amendment of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda or amendments? Seeing none, any objection to approving by acclamation? All right, it'll be so approved. Item number 3 is report of the committee chair and alderman. I have no report. Alderman Gould is,
No report.
Alderman Shelton, not here. Alderwoman Parker Tice.
No report.
Okay, item number 4 is the city administrator report, and that is the continued discussion of the 2022 proposed budget. And we've got some new items to work through this evening.
Thank
Paula,
you,
would you like
Alderwoman
to
Sims.
lead us off?
So at the last meeting, we had concluded all the presentations from all department directors, and what was remaining was presenting you with the adjustments that had been brought up during the meetings. And when I met with each one of you all last week, there was a handout that showed what those adjustments were. So I would like to go through that. And it doesn't impact every department. Some have to do with projected 2021 year-end estimates. As you know, it is a practice to, once the year is over, in March, we will bring to you budget amendments that truly reflect if expenditures has exceeded budget, just so we are able to clean it up. So departments have started working on memos and sending that over to finance so that we can start to kind of get a better grasp on what those amendments will be. So in the coming meetings for Ways and Means, we'll be bringing those up to you. My memory serves me right, we tend to do this around March, so we will be bringing that to you. But in this handout that I shared with you all, it shows 2 items for 2021 estimated expenditures, and that's in the community services relation. We want to do a better job of estimating what the EV charging station cost was to put it over at the community center, and then $2,000 in miscellaneous contractual under MOE. The biggest changes that you're going to see when we talk about adjustments really has to do with the capital improvement budget. I want to take you back to 2017 when the city made the decision, the Board of Aldermen, we were going to do the Brentwood Bound project. And by then, the city had completed all the street improvement projects that we had in the residential area. What the city had been doing for maybe approximately 2-3 years prior to that is transferring up to $1 million each year from general fund. And that was because the initial fund balance policy for general fund was 15%. So the city quickly met 15%, then we exceeded it. And then there was a suggestion that we increase that policy to 50%. So the city was able to transfer money to cover and do more streets. The understanding when the Brentwood Bound project started was we've completed all the residential streets. Certainly we have the industrial area still to do, but we can do that one every year until they're completed. They happen to be more concrete streets, so the cost to do that would be more expensive. So we have budgeted the 2018 COPS. Since the debt was issued in 2018, I think what we did the first year was we capitalized interest into part of the proceeds, and then in 2020, 21, we then had to start making the full debt service payments for the 2018 COPS. What I've discovered in reviewing the budget further before today was that we didn't complete the process by doing a transfer from capital revenue to cover the debt. And what we have been doing instead is just using, since we pay the 2018 series debt from stormwater, we've been using the fund balance from stormwater to pay that debt. Approximate total $2.4 million. So instead of being able to fund all the capital requests that have been brought before you by the departments, we have had to scale those back considerably so that between capital, between stormwater, we can easily make the $1.9 million debt service. So in the sheets that I provided you, I've shown you the capital projects that the city will defer in 2022, in 2023, in 2024. If one could say that there is a silver lining, it is the fact that the parks, the community center debt, 2015 COPS will be paid off in 2024, and what that will do is it will free up about 500,000 that the city can reallocate for more capital, whether that's in capital and stormwater, or whether that's capital relating to Brentwood Bound, that will free up that money. So I want to go through the items that we're deferring in the 2022 capital. The police department had expressed interest in buying 4 vehicles. 3 vehicles will be bought. In talking, or in an email that Chief Spee sent to me this week, there is about $69,000 in asset forfeiture. So he has interest in purchasing the additional vehicles so that there will be a total of 4 that they would purchase in 2022. Other expenses that are being reduced from capital are vinyl banners, the City Hall roof, the City Hall North entrance steps, the Strassner yard fence removal, and for both Public Works and Parks, the $50,000 that had been allocated for the maintenance garage design will be pushed off. You know, I think first of all, the important thing is to complete the Brentwood Bound project and then to actually have a submittal to the RFP for the redevelopment. And then the board can take up, well, where do you want to truly relocate the Public Works Parks maintenance garage? So we've reduced that, and that's how you reach a total of about almost $300,000 there. Then we're deferring the mill and overlay of Evans Avenue and the 2022 sealants and other work, and that's about $250,000. And we're also deferring the lease of the sanitation truck. If you remember about 2 years ago, when we didn't really have money to start purchasing new sanitation trucks, an option that Dan presented to Ways and Means was that we could rent a sanitation truck for $10,000 if we truly had a need for an additional sanitation truck that worked. So there is still avenue to do that in the 2022 proposed budget. So I think that, you know, that's a solution that we're putting forward. And then there will be the ARPA funds, which is the next most important thing. So when you look at the criteria for how we can spend the ARPA funds, it says you can spend it on broadband, you can spend it on sewer, or you can spend it on revenue loss. The good thing is when you look at 2019 through 2021, all funds, the city has lost 1.3 million. So not just COVID impacting us, which it did, but I remember when the mayor was chair of Ways and Means, back then we were directed to be a little bit more conservative in how we project our revenues so that it's truly coming in, you know, based on actual than a projection of what we hope to see. So when we start to track our revenue loss for general fund, for capital, for stormwater, even sewer, because of the program changes that have been made in sewer, the city's lost a total of 1.3. So I've been telling the committee that the money that we've received for ARPA, there's a list that we got from all the departments on other things that we can spend it on. The way to spend it would be first to show the revenue loss. And once you show the revenue loss, then you can spend it on all these other items. But in order for us to be able to adequately make the 2018 series debt service payment, the recommendation in the budget you have before you is to transfer the $803,712 that we expect to receive in 2022 to capital, and then transfer it from capital to stormwater because that debt is paid out of stormwater. So those are the biggest changes that you're going to see. And for us to continue to make the 2018 debt series payment going forward, you're going to see the same type of reduction in your capital in 2023. You're going to see it in 2024. And then, when those TIFs get paid off, there's more money coming into the city. And then I think there's greater latitude in what the city chooses to fund. But I think the days when we are able to fund everything that you see in your 5-year capital improvement, it will really require a prioritization on what is absolutely, absolutely necessary. I want to say, because the question was asked, what have we been spending the money on in capital? We've been spending it on streets. So we did all the residential streets. Now we're doing sealants because we want to, protect it another 20, 25 years. Now we're doing streets in Hanley Industrial Court. Now, we hadn't bought vehicles for parks and public works. We had made them just deal with what they have. And so we started freeing up money for them to buy new vehicles. We're having to stop all of those as well. So what you have before you is still a balanced budget. The sales tax for general fund, if you look, well, not just general fund, but all revenues, if you look at page 20 of the revised document that we gave you, 72% of all our revenue is, across all funds, is from sales tax. Then you have utility taxes, that's about 1.1. You have Prop P, which is a little over 400,000. And then, once again, I want to remind you that there was a change in the policy in how Prop P will be spent. Before, we were using it not just for the additional positions and contractual positions in police, but we were also using it for IT-related and capital expenses for both departments. But with the change in policy, the capital improvement budget is now bearing all those other capital and IT costs for those two departments. But even with that, there's still an unallocated amount of about $94,000 in Prop P. Use tax, we were very conservative in what we budgeted this year, $295,000, and what we're estimating we will collect by year end is $374,000. And then in 2022, we're projecting a little increase, $377,000. So before you is still a balanced budget. However, it's a tightening of the city's belt. We can't continue to spend all the money that we thought we wanted to for capital because we have the Brentwood Bound project. And it was just my reviewing of the budget one more time that allowed me to discover this. And I have Gina Jarvis on the line, and I think the question was asked, is there a reason why this could not have been found in the audit? Remember, the city has two auditors. There's the auditor that's reviewing the Brentwood Bound project, and what that auditor is doing is making sure that the expenditures that we're bringing before the board, we're following the city's financial policies in terms of, was there legislation that was adopted by the board approving that this money could be spent? And are you following the city's financial policies and procedures, meaning the different levels of sign-off and review of those expenses have been done. Now, the annual budget, Gina tells me that it's not something that would have been found, because if you look at stormwater, not only does it actually have stormwater in it, it has Brentwood Bound in it. So those numbers are inflated because, you have the 79 million, and then you also have all these other grants that have come in. So if we had separated Brentwood Bound as its own fund, maybe this would have been more apparent than it is now. Can we go back and change that? There's a lot of work involved to doing that, and the suggestion is if there's a phase 3 for the Brentwood Bound project, which there is, which is the destination playground, we can make sure going forward that we create its own fund for that. You remember, you've heard Craig talk about phase 1, phase 2 of the Brentwood Bound project. Craig tells me that there's maybe an additional 2 million that we will spend to wrap up phase 2. The recommendation is we leave that in stormwater and just start anew with phase 3 in the destination playground, depending on whatever funding that the board truly decides they want to spend on that project. So with that, I'll pause and let you ask me questions.
Alderwoman Tice.
Well, you know I have questions. And so I'm going to start off that I will apologize to staff that I did not put this together earlier. I sort of put it together in the last little few hours, and so I'm sorry about that. So some of them are little minor things that I didn't notice before. So one of them is just in the budget adjustment for 2021 about the charging station. So EV charging stations is funded under community service, it seems.
That's where we've, it's sustainability.
Yeah, but is it
So-
sustainability in Parks and Rec?
No, he leads the effort.
Oh, but it's not.
So currently, and I think even last year, we've been budgeting that in community services. If you remember, the paper shredding, the quarterly event, and then the electronic recycling, all of that is coordinated by Janet. So we've put that in community services. But next year, there's the 20,000, we've now moved that to legislative. So but the person that's leading the effort is Eric.
Great, okay, and then this is just a general comment on the Plan and Development Department. So I sort of brought up at the last minute, at the last meeting, that the part-time planning person wasn't mentioned, and I just assumed that the part-time planning salary was in the full-time planning salary, but apparently it wasn't.
Right.
So that department's budget is up 16%. And I know we've been complaining a lot at the Public Works Committee, and I know there've been a lot of issues with that department, but I just would like to make a strong statement that as we start to look at hiring people in that department and making changes there, that the Public Works Committee is involved with that. Just to have that budget go up that much when we're under such tight constraints everywhere else
Right.
is,
So, I think that the direction has been not to even fill the multidisciplinary inspector position now that we're going to be fully staffed sometime next week in that department, because we've been able to fill the building official and the permit tech. And the folks that we're bringing in are experienced. We hope that that might help and that we might not have to fill that position, but it's going to be an ongoing discussion with the Public Works Committee. One of the reasons also why that department's budget went up is we brought in Gonzalez to do the stormwater plan review. That was never really budgeted before. I think maybe this year was the first year we've fully done it. So part of the expense going up is to fund Gonzalez coming in and doing the BMP reviews for all the applications that would be impacted by that. But absolutely, I hear what you're saying.
and then this is there are a lot of things that were cut, but the one that seemed like it might cause extra costs later is the City Hall roof. So when I was looking at the capital budget, it looks like we're not getting to that till 2025.
Right.
And we're already saying now in 2021 that there are roof issues. So just seems like that has the potential to cost so much more in 2025 if we don't do something. So
Well, I think budgets are a plan, and there's always an opportunity to make amendments to it. So in the Public Works budget, there's $100,000 budgeted for streets and sidewalk. Talking to Dan, I think if you look at the trend, most of what we've spent has been maybe 75 really. So I think we can come to you mid-year and say, we're not gonna spend all 100,000. There might be a room to fund other things. So I think because nothing's completely set in stone, there's an opportunity to be flexible and bring those back to the committee for consideration later on in the year.
Thank you. Then, so the economic development sales tax is building quite a large surplus. And I know at the very end, we have to pay like a double payment, but that's in what, 2042 or something?
Yeah.
So I know we're going to accumulate a lot more money than that. So is
Right.
there a reason, like next year, there's an $850 million surplus?
Yeah.
Can that money be spent to pay off the 2018? I believe that money can be spent to pay off the 2018 COPS. And is there, is that something that we can look at to help fund some of this?
I think it's premature because we're only 2 years in to start to discuss how you're going to spend
So I'm on page
That-
18. There's
that,
if
yeah,
you
that
wanna-
fund balance. And I remember that in the reports that,
And then 177 has more stuff.
in the reports that Craig Schluter presents to the board, he starts to show 800,000. I think it's premature for the board to start to discuss whether they want to, how they want to spend it. I have asked Mark Grimm just for clarification so that I'm able to share this with you, how the 2019, I'm trying to find it here, how the 2019 the economic development sales tax funds, rather, can be spent. Give me a minute here. And you could spend it on economic development, you could spend it on infrastructure. I'm not certain that you could spend it on debt service. The 2019 interest can be spent on capital improvements. The 2019 can be spent on expenses. I might have to carefully look at my email. So right now, I don't believe that the recommendation is that that money can be spent on debt service.
Okay, well, if it can be spent on things like capital improvements, then, by the end of 2024, it looks like the surplus in the ending fund balance at the end in 2024 is 5.2 million.
That's right.
So these are significant dollars that could be spent for things that we're not spending now.
That's right.
And I certainly would never advocate spending all of that, and I really strongly think we should keep some sort of fund balance, but that's a decent amount of money if we spent some of that on capital things. So I think that's something that we need to really understand what what can be done and look at that. If not this year, then next year.
If you give me just a minute here.
Well,
I think Bo was in the middle of answering.
Yeah, I can barely read this. So let me carefully look at this. And I know I sent some information to the board last week, sharing the opinion also on interest income, because we have 1.5 in interest income between the two. So Craig and I are meeting with Brad next week to find out what percentage of that is 2018, what percentage of that is 2019. And I think the initial opinion from Mark is that he would prefer that the city spend the 2018 on the Manchester Road project, which is Brentwood bound. So I'll clear that up and send the information on that. I got your question.
You want, it's yours?
That's fine.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. I can keep, I'll
You're
keep
doing,
going.
You're doing great. You're taking a lot of my questions, so.
So on, it's page 50 of the new document, the Capital Improvements Fund. So we're transferring in the ARPA funds into the capital improvement.
Right,
And then that's going out to Parks and Stormwater.
right.
But the description, this is sort of, I've got a few nitpicky things, but like the description on page 50 talks about how this capital improvement fund, I guess it's a city.
It doesn't refer to the
that,
money
okay.
coming into capital from general fund. And so those are cleanup things that we can do to make it clear.
Okay.
They're all over the book.
So then, sort of along this same line, page 204 in the new document, in the Parks and Stormwater Fund. So after 3 years, is the fund balance in Parks and Stormwater made whole? Because the budget only goes out that many years.
So that's part of what we will be bringing to you during the budget amendment for 2021. The plan is to make it whole by the end of this year as part of the budget amendment.
By the end of this year.
Right. So the recommendation would be, how do we do that? We transfer 1.5 from general fund, we transfer 1 million from capital back to stormwater to make it whole, but we won't do the budget amendment until around March of next year.
So then what are the?
So you're not seeing that reflected completely in here.
Oh, okay, well then what, I can't, sorry, it's so many pages. Easier on paper. Not. It is 204.
207 in the file, I think, is
Yeah.
what you're talking about. So.
But the transfer in Parks and Stormwater, so what are the transfers in 22, 23, and 24 in line 50, 100, 46, 25? We got 1.4 coming in this year, just shy of 1.7 coming in next year, and 2.1 coming in 24. What are those?
So in 22, there's 803 coming from general fund. And then there's,
Well, then the rest
the rest is from capital. And then there's, the rest is from capital because there's about 500,000 in stormwater
right.
already.
Okay, so sorry,
Okay.
back to my original question. Are we finished after 3 years? So it seems to me that we're cutting capital stuff over.
Well, it's a 5-year plan, but the document you have only goes to 2024.
So
So next year, you're going to see 25. And then the year after that, we add the other years to it. If you look at the debt service payment for 2018, in I believe 2031. So if you look at page 20, I think it's 24. Yeah, if you look at page 24, 25, you add those, look at 2025. So right now, it stays at 2.3 until we get to 2031. And then the debt service payment for the 2018 debt jumps to 3 million.
So these are transfers in from, just to pay the cops. These are
Cops.
not transfers in to repay the fund balance.
No.
Okay, I was
Yeah,
thinking.
that's separate.
That's separate. Okay, I was thinking when I was reviewing this that we were repaying the
Oh,
fund
gosh,
balance.
no,
Okay.
once the budget amendment is done in March, stormwater becomes whole.
Okay.
If you remember, some of the discussion that Eric has shared with the board has been, I guess the entire time he's been here, we've been able to add at least maybe 300,000 to the fund balance, which is why we were able to grow the fund balance to what it has become now. And even during COVID, I believe he was able to add, what was it, 100,000, 200,000 to the fund balance? About how much? 400? Okay, so what that means is that, and also the Public Works in particular, Public Works Committee, almost 3 years ago, wanted us to slow down the capital projects that we were working on in parks. And so we would budget for, I think it was the maintenance shed over at what is now the sports complex park. And we didn't do that. So what that did was it just rolled back into his fund balance. And we've been very careful with some of the projects that we've brought forward. So he's able to build that, but I think it's important to restore that to the current level this year.
Still in Parks and Stormwater, it's on page 116 in the new document, but the 57, the comfort station design. So I noticed that the comfort station is out
But the design is in.
because we started it this year and they're
Right,
gonna.
we'll finish it.
We'll finish it, okay.
Right.
Okay, so we're, and then just looking at the capital budgets, so like police vehicles, like we're buying them this year and next year, and then like there are no police vehicles in the 5-year plan. And then like there's no street work in 23 and 24. And then there in 2025, it's the trash truck, the street sweeper, and the fire truck. So those were all things that were coming now, and now we're doing them either not at all or in 2025. So it just seemed like, it seems like those police vehicles are gonna need to be replaced at some point in the next few years. I can't believe we're not gonna do any street work in the next 2 years.
We're going to do, we won't do as many as we've been doing before because we've completed all the residential. So that's why you're not gonna see a long list like you used to of
But I
all the
didn't
different
notice
streets.
money,
But
like-
we're doing sealant work.
Yeah, I guess, is that in there? Or is that not in capital? Is that in?
It's in
regular?
capital, but it's one line item. It's not a breakdown of all the streets. You know, we chose not to include that list in there anymore.
Yeah, that makes-
So
which makes sense.
instead of seeing all the list of streets where we're gonna do sealant work, you're just gonna see one line item that tells you what that dollar amount is. Am I right? Okay.
Yeah, we have a detailed list.
Yeah. So we
Okay.
we can provide the detailed list if you need it. And to your earlier point about the police department, I'm not certain that their desire to buy vehicles was ever in the capital plan. There was just an understanding. Remember, I think it was 2 years ago that they came before the board and the policy changed in the fact that they would be allowed to buy 4 vehicles every year if the funding was there. So when the funding is not there, we scale it back. The good thing is that we then have to prioritize because some of the other expenses that they want to spend their asset forfeiture on, now they choose to spend it on another vehicle. I don't believe this situation will always be. The priority list of what we're funding in capital next year will change the year after. So to say that we won't be able to do sanitation truck, I think we will be. Will we be able to do a fire truck? I think one of the discussions I had with Chief Cottrell was that I think right now we're showing a lease payment of 3 years. If we extend it to greater than 3 years, to 4 years, 5 years, what that does is it allows other departments to also have capital expenditures in the 5-year CIP. Or we straddle it over 2 years. You know, if it's going, and that's what we did with this, the renovation of this building. We didn't have enough money to do all the renovation in 1 year, so we did half 1 year, we did half the other year, so other departments could also spend money from the CIP.
Well, there just seem to be many things not in the capital budget for a long time, and so it's just, I'm mainly just pointing it out because it's,
Good to
it's
know.
a pretty stark,
Right.
change from things we were planning to get this year that,
Right.
like the trash truck, the street sweeper, and then the fire truck was coming
Right.
sooner than
But
2025.
But you go back to the official statement for the 2018 COPS, and if we had caught the fact that that transfer needed to be made, some of what we've expended money on in 19, 20, 21 would not have been.
Okay, I think that's all I have.
And, you know, she covered a lot of the ground that I had concerns over. I guess what I would say is similar to the concern that Alderwoman Tice had as far as the roof of this building. And, when we prolong it, does it get that much more expensive? I'd say the same thing for the streets and the sealants. And so as we look toward mid-budget adjustments, I'd love to see staff be able to say, okay, if we opened up some funding somewhere or found some budget somewhere, what are the ones that would actually help reduce big ticket items down the road?
Right.
Big ticket items down in 2025, knowing that we've got to push a lot of these things so that we can then, as a board, determine, hey, let's keep doing sealants so that we don't have a massive mill and overlay
Right.
bill down the road or something like that. So that's how I would love to see.
We will bring that back, and
Those-
there's an
yeah.
opportunity. When you look at the list that we've provided you, it seems like the department that's being impacted the most is Public Works.
Yes.
They were going to spend almost $1 million on street projects, and we've had to scale that back. But Dan has done such a great work with sidewalk maintenance, and we're doing, I'd say, a majority of that, if not all, in-house, that there might be an opportunity, that 100,000, to either reallocate it for the roof. I think there's also about 20,000 for the steps. In my mind, I don't know if Dan agrees, I think some of that might be more cosmetic that could be deferred. So the really important things, we will sit down and discuss and bring a priority to Ways and Means and Public Works and have you all weigh in on those.
Okay, that'd be great. And I'm definitely interested to hear what you find out as far as what the economic development sales tax can be used for, and whether that can pay down debt service.
Okay.
I totally agree that would be a priority to do so. And then if there are capital, and I think that funding can only be used within the bounds of Brentwood bound, is that correct? So if there are capital improvement
Well, not necessarily. It
Okay.
can be used for infrastructure.
infrastructure anywhere in the city?
Anywhere in the city.
Okay,
So, yeah, that gives the board latitude to spend it on other things. And streets would be infrastructure. I think you will realize that we removed the UTV that police and fire had asked for. Even some of the funds that have come in for the Brentwood Bound project could be repurposed for that. So, but those should be a consideration when the project's
yeah,
complete.
no, understood. Okay, thank you.
Did it? I had a couple questions, or I guess points to emphasize. With these amendments, the budget's balanced,
Budget's
right?
balanced.
We're meeting our fund balance policies. Is that right?
We continue to strive to meet it. So 2020, it was at 45%. And the only reason why in the initial document we gave you, it jumped to 63 was because of the 2 CARES Act payment and the 1 ARPA, American Rescue Plan fund, and what we anticipate we would get in 2022. So once we bring to you a transfer of 1.5 and 1 million from general fund and capital, it will go back to the 2020 level, but we're still striving to meet the 50% policy. So that we will continue to do that.
So we're moving in the right direction.
We're moving
at
in the
least.
right direction.
Okay. And do you feel confident that, however it is this issue was missed, has now been addressed, identified, corrected going forward?
Absolutely.
And if it does, and to use your phrasing, if a phase 3 occurs, if and when, we'll probably separate that out, so we're.
The reason
be
why
able
we
to-
didn't catch this was we were co-mingling the Brentwood Bound with stormwater. And if we had followed through on the initial recommendation to separate it out, it would have been glaring that we didn't make the transfer to pay for that. But the debt service payment, so that I'm clear, continues to be paid. We are not delinquent, deficient, behind, in arrears or anything. It's being paid.
And then to the extent that we expended money on things in reliance of how of not catching this, it's not as if we didn't spend money. We spent money on things the city needed, correct?
Legitimate things. There were no fluff in there. I don't even know what fluff would be, because I wouldn't bring them to you.
You guys have any other questions? I know we've got some aldermen in the gallery. If you have any questions, I'd certainly recognize you.
Thank you. But one of our questions is that in our recent compensation plan discussion, we assumed that there was money available for most anything. If we have limited Prop P now to salaries, that means we cannot make some of the transfers we might want to make with this budget. So would the committee consider revising our previous discussion and what we put forth and go back to making Prop P monies available for anything that would qualify, not listing it just for salaries? Does that make sense?
I guess I'm not. I imagine that's probably going to come up at the board level, if at all. I mean, I don't know what would be. I don't know if now is the time to consider.
At least I think Alderwoman
That philosophy.
O'Neill has asked, and I think what she's asking is, could there be a change in the policy on what Prop P will be spent for? So prior, even this year, we were spending it for new positions in police, the evidence manager, the CALIA manager. We were also spending it on a lot of IT-related expenses for police and fire, and some capital. So if I understand you, can the policy be changed so that the proceeds could be spent on other things like before? So right now, there's an unallocated balance of about 94,000 in Prop P. Could that be spent on, I don't know what, could that be spent on other expenses that are not position-related that the city needs? That is something that the board could take up. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, okay,
Or
that's it.
is she suggesting a shift back to 75th percentile?
Where you-
So that
where you
it
shi-
frees up the funding? I'm just want to make sure I'm clear on.
I think it becomes difficult, and I'm just reacting off the top of my head based on that, what I just heard, to go back to something other than a 95th percentile, when we've already implemented that this year, and it's reflected in the compensation schedule. And we're going forward, we're about to do reviews again for next year. Do you take the money back? I guess you could. If you're in dire straits, I don't think the city's there. I would recommend against that. But it certainly is an item for the board to discuss.
I mean, I know I would rather defer purchasing of police vehicles than cutting someone's salary. I mean,
I think they probably would agree with you. Remember, there are still, I think, is it 4 firefighters who are still frozen in place? 5. And then there are, the chief, the police chief, Chief Spees, still talks about reclassification of his personnel because he wants them to be comparable to fire. So, and if you take that money away for that purpose, then it's all up for discussion.
But as it stands, with this budget that's been proposed, and with the cutbacks that have been presented this evening, We're able
I'm
to
not
afford this-
recommending
this-
any
but
of
we're
that.
able to afford the salaries, we're able to,
Absolutely.
through Prop P funds, is that
Right.
right?
Right.
Okay. There other questions?
So-
Alderwoman Tice?
Well, I'm sort of on this question that Kathy had. So is the 94,000 just sitting, the Prop P balance is just sitting there?
It's sitting in general fund.
It's sitting in general fund?
Yeah, because Prop P shows up as one of the revenue sources in general fund.
So conceivably, because in 2022, we're not expecting to spend all of that $94,000 for salary, that could be spent on capital.
It could be.
Not, I mean, not an ongoing capital, but it
Right,
could be
one
spent on
time. It could be.
one-time things, and there still would be 88,000 surplus the next year.
Right.
Because we couldn't certainly hire
No,
$150,000 worth of people
no,
with this, but
no. You could definitely use it for capital. So when you think about capital, some of the, I don't remember, I'd have to look at the first, give me a minute, fire, tab 7. So when I look at,
here, it looks like they got.
I'm
doesn't
trying
look
to
like
think
anything
what you
was-
could use that money for.
Doesn't look like
If
anything
you
was
would
cut and fired.
prefer, for instance, that police not use their asset forfeiture to buy the fourth vehicle, that could go towards the purchase of a vehicle. I'm trying to look at the fire budget and,
Or alternatively, you could spend the $94,000 on, half the vehicles and then free up the vehicle cost for some other capital thing.
right, then your policy would have to change completely because then it wouldn't limit it to just police and fire.
Well, no, I'm
It'd be
saying you would
citywide.
spend that on, like, the police department,
Yeah,
and then, but then you're not spending, if you spent 90,000 of the 120,000 or 160,000 on the
right,
cars.
right.
Then you have then freed up.
Exactly.
94,000
You're right.
of money to
You're right.
spend elsewhere in the budget.
Elsewhere in the
So
city.
you're spending,
You could do that.
I mean, that's,
Yeah, you could do that.
so,
That's an option.
yeah.
And we were conservative with our revenues, so there could be opportunities
There-
as we go forward. to-
Absolutely. There could be more money, for
loosen the
instance, that
belt,
comes
so
in
to
in
speak.
use tax. Yeah, I think I provided that example. We know that we're collecting more money in vehicle tax because there was a bill that was signed by, I think we also voted on it, our taxpayers to increase by 12 cents every year over the next 5 years, vehicle tax, gas tax rather. So that's, next year it goes up to 35. I think by year 3, it's a 6-figure number. So revenue, general fund continues to grow in different areas. And Public Works Committee has approved planning and development to revise their fee structure. So that will go up as well. And we will be bringing that to Public Works and the board in 2022. So you're going to see some growth in that as well.
Well, I would also just note that, this is our budget. This is an expression of a philosophy of how we think our money should be spent. It doesn't mean we're going to. So I think as we go forward, that we'll be challenged to take a close look at expenditures and make sure, in light of the cutbacks that we had to make and the belt tightening, that, we're continue to be careful with our citizens' money. And I think that this budget reflects that. All right, well, are there any more questions? Not seeing any, so at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve the 2022 proposed budget as amended, and to move it on to the big board for review and consideration.
So moved.
Second?
Are there further discussion on that? Going once, going twice? Okay, roll call, please.
Alderwoman Tice,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
Yes.
Do you vote?
Yeah, I vote.
Okay.
Yes.
Alderwoman
So-
Sims.
Alderwoman Sims, the vote is 3 yay, 0 nay. Vote passes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. This was several meetings, lots of work. Thanks for the extra time and review, and I think we've got a good budget. So I think the hard work's gonna pay off. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. The only thing on that is the review and approval of the minutes from the November 4th meeting. Have you all had an opportunity to review? Do you have any changes or notes to make on that? Any objection to approving by acclamation? See none, it'll be approved. Item 6 is citizen comments. Do we have anyone either in the in-person gallery or the virtual one who'd like to come forward and make a comment or have a question? All right, I'm not seeing any. At this point,
To adjourn?
Second.
all right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.